Welcome to the Unshakable Self. I'm your host, Seryna Myers, and today I have a special guest. And I say special, all the guests are special, but the reason I say special is because most of the times when I invite people onto the show, it's people that I somehow have a connection to. They're either people that are in my network or they're friends of friends. And this is someone who I'm going in completely cold. We met 5 minutes ago. But
Yeah.
yeah, but there's someone who's incredibly they contain such potent medicine in their words, in their truth, and their authenticity, the fact that they continue to show up. So this is Kevin Garcia, friends, and I'm really excited to have you here.
Buenas.
Yeah, so tell
Hello.
us.
Thanks for having me.
No, thank you for coming and for saying yes when you have no idea who I am. That's incredible. So let's start off with just tell me a little bit about you and your journey to being unshakable.
Sure. Well, I'll tell you what, like this past year was actually the year that I got shook. Because I we'll probably get into that. But the Cliff Notes version of me, my name's Kevin Miguel Garcia. I am a queer mystical theologian and practitioner. That's like the byline that I use. And a spiritual director. I've written two books. One of them is called Bad Theology Kills. The second one is called What Makes You Bloom. Like every queer spiritual, not every queer spiritual person, but like a lot of queer spiritual people living in America, living in the South. I grew up in a good Christian home, deconstructed from that 10 years ago when I came out of the closet as queer. And now, currently, like still in some way I've given up on the dream, not given up on the dream. I've accepted the fact that life is really complicated and dreams don't always work out the way you want them to. So
Mhm.
like I've got I got a catering job, and I've got a house cleaning job, and like I'm hustling like every motherfucker on the planet because we're all underemployed. Thanks Elon Musk. It's another story for another time, another bitch fest for another time. Um, but my main thing, I when I'm doing what I think I'm supposed to be doing, I'm helping people reconnect with their sense of God, um, or their sense of self, their connection to love itself as a driving force, and it makes me incredibly happy. I love it. I am single. I'm a Scorpio. I have a dog named Tippy, and since I shaved my head last year,
Looks
finally, after
great, by
having
the
like
way.
years of it, like thank you so much.
Yeah.
It took me a while to get there too. It was just I was having and I'm like it was like I hated my hair and I also hated life, and I was having an emotional moment over an ex, and I was just like bzzz. And then everyone was like, Kevin, you kind of look hot. And I'm like, did I accidentally get hot? This is great. I love this. Love this.
It was nice before too, don't get me wrong, but it's
Thank you so much.
definitely a very raw vibe, which I think is really aligned with just how you share yourself in the world, at least in like
Yeah.
the public persona of you anyway, because that's what I know.
Yeah. It feels I feel a lot lighter emotionally.
Mm.
Everyone's like, oh, hair carries emotion and memory, and I'm like, I think they might be fucking right, because it was like I shaved my head and I got so much clarity about a lot of stuff. After that point, big like weight was lifted off of me. So I'll take it. It was the right thing for the moment, and so far continues to be a good thing.
Good.
Um,
And if it doesn't, you'll
and
grow it
now
back.
I'm yeah,
Yeah.
and trying to think, is there anything else? I have a podcast I'm rebooting in 2025, like yourself, Tiny
Mm.
Revolution.
Love
I'm
it.
also starting a new weekly live show called Highly Favored, and where me and my friends are going to get together, and we may or may not be getting high and talking about whatever we want to, because that's my vibe.
I love it. That's awesome.
As
You know,
I
um,
laugh in my evil laugh.
you know what? It was evil, but it was perfect. Like I dig it. It's great. Um, you know what I think is really cool about your work, and maybe this is just in like where I'm at and where it speaks to me in my own journey. You do not shy away from the word God. Like you use it with love, with
Mm,
reverence, with whatever. And
yes.
I'm someone who was raised Catholic, super witchy. Um,
Hmm.
I left the church to go to art school, and then that kind of opened up my whole world because everyone I knew was Catholic before that. I didn't have as much deconstructing to do as you did. I
Nice
didn't even really recognize my own queerness until my wife realized she was trans. So then I was like,
work.
oh, I'm married to a woman. Yeah, okay, cool. That makes sense. That tracks. Um, and for, I would say, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, and I've been on my spiritual journey for 15 years, maybe 5 to 7 years ago, I finally got comfortable to say God without like flinching. Like it was such a,
Hmm.
oh, it was a heavy word. And I could say the divine, I could say the universe, I could even say the goddess, but God was like,
Hmm.
like it just, yeah, it just kind of
Yeah,
brought
it
something. And
belongs to
how,
them.
yeah. And how did you reclaim that? Because God's for everybody. Like it doesn't need to
Hmm.
be for the church. Like how did you do that?
I think it began by recognizing that the word God is exactly that. It's a
Mm,
word. And if a word is, I mean, I understand why a word can be triggering, obviously. I understand the trigger. Um, but I think what happened for me is I recognize that something in A Course in Miracles, one of the initial lessons says, I have given everything I see meaning. I've given, everything in the world that has meaning, I have invested meaning in it. So therefore, I can divest meaning from things or change meaning from things. I'm making up the meaning. So if in my head I hear the word God and my brain auto populates terrible things that have happened to me in the name of God, let's also be real. We're not just thinking about general God, we're thinking about Christian God. We're
hmm.
thinking about oppressive God. We're thinking about white Jesus. We're thinking about colonizer God. Um, and from where I'm sitting, that's not God. Like I would say, I'm like, I mean, unless you want to say it's a God, sure. But if we're saying that God is the ultimate force in the universe that's animating and holding everything together, that's not God. It
Yeah.
isn't. And so, like when I recognized that for myself, I was like, I was like, well, what is God? I'm just like, I know, like for me, if God really is love, I know what love is. Another thing, of course, says is love is obvious, and so is hate.
Hmm.
And so when I recognize that like love is obvious, I'm like, oh, anything that is loving is a voice for God. Anything that is, whatever is good, whatever is lovely, whatever is true, whatever, think about such things. Um, I'm like, that's God. Like, and I began to like sit in my own authority on that, to be able to say, like, the feeling I get when my friends help me, the gratitude I feel is, you know, I'm thankful to God because God is moving through all these other, staying the animating force of the universe. He's showing up through these individuals or this group of people. So, short version, I recognized it was just a word. And I also recognize it's so incomplete. Because like everyone's like, would you believe in God? I'm like, pause. Because it's like if by God you mean a personality that's out there somewhere who sees me when I'm sleeping and knows when I'm awake and like is keeping tabs on all of my sins, even though it says in the good book that love keeps no record of wrongs. Um, if you mean, the Republican Jesus who wants us all to have guns but no health care, um, then we're not talking about the same thing at all. We're
We're
not
talking about
talking
Santa Claus,
like what I
really. That sees you when you're
mm-hmm,
sleeping, knows when you're awake. Like that's and if we can if we can recognize Santa Claus as like this fictional creation, why can't we see that
mm-hmm,
that version of God is just as fabricated?
mm-hmm, just as fucked up. Like that's what's
True.
so interesting. It's we've been convinced that that which is good is bad and that which is causing us suffering must be of God. And I
Hmm.
think that's not true. It can't be, at least from where I'm sitting. Like suffering is inevitable, but the Buddha tells us that there's a way out. And I think that's also what Jesus was trying to say
Hmm.
contextually. Like Buddhism gives us a way to deal with our inner world, and I think Christianity gives us a way to live in community. Like that's another conversation. But I'll let you steer it
No, no, I know,
because
I
I
dig
could
it.
go on for days. Um, but I think that like recognizing also that like there's no hell, so there's no reason to fear questioning any of this stuff, and I think that's the beginning part. Um, yeah,
I feel like
I
almost
guess
even
that's where it started off. Like,
I was gonna say even being willing to question, I think is that's the big scary thing. Like I don't know if it was the same for you, but for me, questions when I was in the church was like No, like that, there's no room for that. And everything is, well, no, that's just the devil telling you that. Like it was really easy to dismiss
Mm-hmm.
any kind of curiosity. And I remember like at a pretty young age of hearing things and going, that's not true for me. And I was way too chicken to say anything. But the first time I used a
Mm-hmm.
Ouija board, I went to confession and I told the priest, and he said, "Oh no, that wasn't your grandfather. That was the devil." And I remember being like, no. And I did the penance. Like I sat down and I prayed for a
Mm-hmm.
long fucking time. But I was willing to take like the punishment for it, but I knew in my heart that I had had a connection with the other
Mm-hmm.
side. And did
Yeah.
you I feel like holding that tension, I don't think I would have lasted in the church if I'd stayed beyond high school for that reason, because I
Mm-hmm.
had too many questions and because I
Yeah.
I don't know how I could have done the reconciliation that you've done of being able to say like this is the story and this is actually how it applies to my life. Like I could just hold on to
Mm-hmm.
that doesn't feel good, but I couldn't actually do anything with that.
Right. I think what happens for a lot of people when they walk away from oppressive or yeah, oppressive religion, fundamentalist religion, whatever you like to brand it. Um, oh my God, back me up. What did you just say? That ADHD. I have something to go with this.
That's okay, me too. I was talking about how do you reconcile the like the knowing that something
Right.
you're hearing isn't quite
Mm-hmm.
right, but at the same time, um, yeah, and like
Mm-hmm.
doing something about that. Like being able to hold the faith and
What I
your
would,
truth at the same time, I guess.
yeah. I mean, I don't think they need to be separate things, you know?
Hmm.
And also I think faith is such a funny word because like I don't know if I have any. Like this is what's very strange is like I don't have faith in God. I have experience. Um, I have experience of life itself and I have experience of love. Um, faith, I have trust in not in things, in our, ancestors who are unseen and are in possibly spirits. It's one of those things where it's like I don't know anything for sure. I don't claim to know anything for sure, but I do trust because of my experience that if I keep my certain practices, if I hold certain thoughts in my mind, um, my life quality is improved. And that's like baseline, where it's just like my life is improved because of these things. Um, I think a lot of people are also like under the impression that you must reconcile what you have always grown up with where you are now, and I don't think that's true either. Um, I think you need to either, if you want to hold on to it and you want to expand it, you can, but you don't have to. Um, because once you find like I think that the big secret of it all is you have to get yourself grounded first. You got to get yourself in your body. You got to figure out who the fuck you are and who love says you are, if you will, who your truest inner self is. And when you have that, you can approach any scripture of any tradition with clear eyes and a really really like wise head, because it's like I can look at something, I can read the words of Paul who says, when a man prays with his head covers, he dishonors himself. But when a woman prays with her head uncovers, she dishonors her head. And I can say, nah, no, thank you. I don't think I need that. Also, fun fact, Paul didn't actually write that, but it's again another biblical history lesson for another time. And I can just look at scripture, from any tradition and say, that's not helpful for me.
Hmm.
And I think that that's where I lay my head on theology and spiritual talk in general is it helpful? Not is it
Hmm.
true, if something is universally true, it cannot be threatened. But everything can be tested.
Hmm. For
And
sure.
so that's, like my big thing is people just like, don't try to reconcile anything. Get right with you. Get right in your heart. Get right in your body. Learn how to love yourself unconditionally. And then when you're ready, you can approach anything with the assurance and be able to pick up, like, you'll be able to hear what the spirit is saying through even a flawed text. And they're all flawed, by the way.
Hmm.
I think, and also just like when you have a connection to self, when you have that connection to spirit, you can read things that aren't intentionally spiritual and see the deeper lesson there.
Hmm.
You ever watch Steven Universe? You want
No.
the gospel? Oh,
Steven Universe.
honey,
Interesting.
okay. Go watch Steven Universe. You will die in the best way, and you will
Okay.
live, and you'll be born again.
Hmm.
But it's like this whole story of just like otherness and difference and the power of loving each other unconditionally. And also it's, you know, crime fighting cartoons and silliness in music. Rebecca Sugar is a truly great person. But yeah, I don't think everyone should reconcile everything. You don't need to.
Well, that connection that you're talking about is to me what I consider to be the unshakable self. It's where you are so
Yes.
anchored in like who you are and the magic you
Yes.
bring to the world and whatever, that it doesn't matter if you are at work or if you were with your spouse or if you're with your racist uncle at dinner. Like, no matter what,
Mhm.
it's not necessarily that you're unflappable because we're still humans and we're going to have like emotional reactions, but your
Yeah, we're gonna get
identity,
flapped.
yeah, yeah. But your identity is not shook as a result of these things
Mhm.
because you're so anchored in. So, from what like like I said before we started the show, you've been in my ear for the last several days while I've been listening to Bad Theology Kills. You
Mhm.
sound like someone who has really fucking anchored in.
Mm.
How did you do that? Because you're young too,
Practice.
right? Like how old are you if you're willing
Dep-
to say?
I mean, depends on what you consider young. I'm 35, and so
Okay.
I feel like I'm staunchly moving into middle life now. I don't feel like I'm old, but certainly older now. I don't think I'm young. It also, I think all of us need to recognize everyone born 2025 onward is Gen Beta. The
Yeah, I've
oldest
heard
Gen
that.
Alphas, the oldest Gen Alphas are 15. We're about to get roasted again, everybody. Welcome to
Yeah.
the internet.
I'm the end of Gen X, and when someone said
Like
that
a
makes
ex-millennial cusp.
yeah, I'm like, yeah, I'm very close. And when they were saying, "Oh yeah, well Gen X is the new official boomer," I was like, "Fuck you."
No, 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 no.
They were bumping everybody up the line, and I was like, "No thanks. I'm not here
I
for
don't
that."
think that's not how that works. Okay,
Okay,
it's not
good.
how any of this works.
Good.
Um, but how I got to this feeling of like having an unshakable self, I love. By the way, I love that analogy. Like that's exactly like like what you call the unshakable self is what some people call the true self, or like your essence, or the God self within the
Hmm.
deposit of the divine within you, whatever. Um, but it came at my best. Um, like I'm in touch with that part of myself when I practice. And what I mean by that is I sit my ass down and I do 10 to 15 minutes of meditation, and I'm doing my morning pages. If you've never heard of that, it's a tool from Julia Cameron's The Artist's Way 12-week program, can be self-directed or done in groups. Very, very good. And it really helps me get in touch with my creativity again. Like all of my real thoughts are underneath all my bullshit thoughts. And so I it really did come from practicing it. And by that,
Hmm.
just sitting down every single day and connecting with love. And I've, learned various practices over the year, because I went from being like, I'm not a Christian, I'm a yogi. And then I was like, oh, I think I'm gonna like convert to Buddhism. And then I just end up, being a mystic anyways, and just floating somewhere in the middle. But what I've learned is that peace is an inside job. And the other truth for me is that there's great love for you here.
Mm.
And when we don't connect with that source of love, I mean, sometimes it's hard. Like this entire past year has been so fucking hard for me and like depressing. And like I feel like I've been at my lowest. And yet there is still great love for me here.
Hmm.
And it's like when I focus on it, even for an instant, I'm transported. Like all of the shame of failure, all of the feelings I have about not being enough, or like, whatever. It just like, well, Kevin, do you really think all that shit matters as much as this? Like, do you really think what's in your bank account is equal to your self worth?
Is that
Do you
truer than
really
the
think
love you
having,
know?
and like, that's a really, really intense question,
Hmm.
because a lot of people would say, no, I don't believe that. And that's okay. If you're not there yet, if you don't believe that, you should not try to trick yourself and believe into believing it. Um, something you might have to start with a more believable affirmation, just like, I believe that it's possible that there's love for me.
Hmm.
You could just like, but you have to start somewhere. And I think like being able to get into that unshakable mindset of great love saved my soul in a way, and not from hell, but just from a small life. I used to really hate myself, and I don't anymore. Like, that to me is healing. That to
Hmm.
me is a miracle. But every single day for me, like, and being a spiritual director, it's also the thing I tell everyone. Like, if you want to get in touch with love, you should do it. And you
I
can do
like
it
that.
every day. And the more often you do it, the better you are going to feel. And the better you feel, the more opportunities you're going to have to do the thing you actually want to do in this life.
Hmm.
Um, and also recognize that when you do fall off of that feeling, when you do fall off the path, and you not if, but when, know that you can come back.
Hmm.
Too many of us also get really hung up on like feeling like, oh, I didn't keep my practice perfectly. I can't do it. Shut up. Shut up and go sit down
Yeah.
and do it.
Give
Like,
yourself
there's
five
just like
minutes,
sometimes I
10
want to,
minutes.
well, I don't know. I don't know. I'm just like, stop. Stop. Look at your ego and just calmly take it by the face and say, stop talking, baby.
Mm.
Breathe with me. And not in a way that's like, it's almost just like a loving sibling or a loving parent going to a child and just saying, I get that you're freaking the fuck out right now, girl. Stop letting your ego run your show. And if you don't know that the ego is running if you don't think the ego is running your show, lols. But it's like, it's not, the ego is not something to conquer. The ego is a child who needs a home.
Hmm. Well, I love that
It's a
even the
pissy
way
little
you said
baby.
that, you have like this firmness, this like, don't fuck around here. Like, this is legit,
Mm-hmm.
but also with such love and such compassion, because that's
Mm-hmm.
really what that part needs. Like, I think we
Mm-hmm.
get so caught up in like the judging it and the shame and the should. Oh, fucking should. Like, we get it so caught up in these stories that we forget that actually what we need is some grace and some compassion
Mm-hmm.
and like a little bit of tenderness, because part of us needed that
Mm-hmm.
thing that like derailed wherever we think we're, should supposed to be. Like,
Mm-hmm.
those are the parts that
There's a,
need the most love.
yes, and it's a very fierce kind of love and compassion. It's like, I love you enough. I'm talking to myself. I love you enough to not, or like, put it, if you want to, like, some people want to, uh, I try to be as non-dual as possible, but sometimes I got to go for two rather than go for oneness. I go for two-ness. And so it's
Hmm.
like, okay, body, I think that you deserve to feel better. Even if whatever I am, thinks that I don't deserve to feel better, this body deserves everything. And
Mm.
it's almost in that way, I'm like, my body is God. I
Hmm.
serve this body. And what's so crazy is this body gives me back more than I could ever imagine. The thousands of billions of things going right all the time to keep me functioning. And I'm like, you know, mostly able-bodied, very, healthy, haven't had any serious medical issues thus far. I mean, I could complain about the hairline, but whatever.
We've all got something.
you, small potatoes.
Hmm.
Um, but like, it's really understanding that just like your body is a person who deserves love and respect and kindness. And like, when you're feeling bad, it's usually because the body is dysregulated somehow. And
Mm.
so it's like, comfort your body. Let there be, touch peace. And when you do that, it just, what you do for the body is what you do for the mind, is what you do for the soul. It's all the same thing. And so it's just like, well, I know I hear all of the complaints of like people I've talked to or worked with, or even my own complaints. And it's like, well, it's just going to come back later. I'm like, yeah. And you're going to take care of it later too, aren't you?
Hmm.
Like, and we got to recognize, Trisha Hersey calls this a lifelong meticulous love practice. And that's really it.
Hmm.
And I wish I could just snap my fingers and get everybody to understand that.
I
It's
actually
like,
resist her work
you're
so
not going to get it
much.
done because it's never over.
Yeah,
Go ahead.
I resist her work so much for that reason because I'm still undoing my own like patriarchal, capitalistic fucking hustle machine in my
Mm,
mind, and I know that this is not my truth. I know that it's not aligned, and the idea of
mm.
like just being, I think that's my theme for this whole year is just being. The doing will
Just be
come.
there.
The doing comes when
Mm-hmm.
I'm inspired, when I'm lit up, when I'm like, that's why it took me 2 years to bring this
Yes.
podcast back. You know what I mean? I don't want to do something for the sake of it. That's just busy work. And what does that accomplish other than burning
Yeah.
me out? The
Hey,
more,
come on now. And like that's where I was last year too. Just like I hit the top of the year, I put the book out and then I just crashed and burned. And I was just like, I can't do it,
hmm
And it was also like it was twofold. There's like, everybody, my work like I was working with a lot of clients and it was sustaining me for my entire job. And then, my work is predicated, or like let me rephrase that. Being paid for my work is predicated on other people having disposable income, and ain't nobody got disposable income right now.
yeah,
At
it's
least
true.
not the people I work with.
hmm
Um, and learning that that's okay. Learning
hmm
like I does that's all right. Like, it's learning that your art doesn't have to pay your bills is humbling. And everyone's like, oh, it should. I'm just like, well, do you still want to do it though?
And if it was your
And if the
100%, if you had, that was your commitment to putting bread and butter on the table, would it still be inspiring? Would it still be fun? Would it light you up in the same way?
Mhm.
I know I'm watching this with my
Yeah.
wife because she's a professional artist and she was this like underground, nobody knew. Well, people knew people in her circles knew who she was, but she didn't have like success
Hmm.
until, I'd say maybe like it started to really build about 10 years ago. And then in 2020, it fucking skyrocketed, which coincidentally is the same time she realized she was trans. So go figure. But,
Classic.
that, her deepening into her own self then made her more visible to the world. But I also see the behind the scenes struggle of now that it's her full time thing. How do you maintain that?
Hmm.
How do you stay inspired? How do you not let it consume you? And it can if we buy into the stories about like what it sells for being our worth because our creativity is part of us, it can absolutely devour
Hmm.
you. It's really tricky.
It's a balance to be sure, like a balance to
Yeah.
be struck. Because
Yeah.
I mean, like, we can't lie and say that, like, like having people like our stuff is great. It
hmm
feels so good. And also just like we make it because we wanted to connect with people. Maybe, hopefully, at least in my book. I think that was what really burned me out too, was not living up to my own expectations and my own fantasy, if you will. Because like in my mind, oh, this book is going to be a New York Times best. So funny enough, the self-published book, Bad Theology Kills,
hmm
has sold 66% better in a year than my second book, which was traditionally published. Like it had
Interesting.
like I've sold like 3,500 copies of Bad Theology Kills independently on my own. And then the other one, I think I hit 1,000 right before the end of the year. And I'm like,
Which
that is interesting, which is good because 85% of books don't sell 1,000 copies.
mhm.
Um, but I'm just like, interesting. And it was like, there's a part of me that got like really bitter and angry because it wasn't popping off the way I wanted it to. Like, I was like, and it was like, I was angry. I was getting mad at like the wrong people. It's just like, at them or the audience or like whoever. I'm just like, it's not their job to read your book, Kevin. And two, okay. So it just like, do you really, it wasn't a flop, but also just like, so what?
Mhm.
Like, now what would you like to do? It didn't sell the way you wanted it to. It's not resonating as the thing about it is the people who have read it love it. It's very helpful. I've used it as my curriculum as a spiritual director when I have ongoing work with people. And, like books about healing aren't sexy.
Yeah, mine's called Sacred Anger, so I hear you on that too. And I had the same thing, and the thing that I've had to tell myself because I self-published. Well, I used a hybrid publisher, but you're basically on your own.
Same, same.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, and I the thing that I don't think I even told myself, someone, I remind myself because someone told me, like, it's not like this is where the book ends. Like, it continues to exist.
Flow.
And
Hmm.
every so often I'll hear from someone. Like, I had someone say to me at a retreat last year, she's like, you know what? I moved, I downsized everything. I got rid of almost every single one of my books, and I kept yours. And I'm like, okay, I made the cut. It's one person, but I made the cut. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
and I know I've had
That's
like therapists read it and they recommend it to their people, and other coaches and grief people, like, they recommend it to their clients. And I go, You know what? Maybe it's 5 copies a month that sell, whatever it is, but like it's 5 fucking copies a month. And like those are 5 more people who are hearing this message.
yeah. And also, if you're listening to this right now, please go pick up a copy of Sacred Anger by Seryna Myers.
Hi, thank you very
Or
much.
also, I pronounced your name correctly, right?
You did, yes. Yeah, I guess we never actually talked about that. Yeah. Did
Um,
you find, since we're on the land of books, when you put
sure.
out Bad Theology Kills, did you have like the vulnerability crash on the other side of it of like, holy fuck, my whole truth is out there?
No, I think because I was doing my podcast for a couple years before I wrote that, so I had like unloaded on the internet
Mm,
already, um, a little bit, and I was also like, um, I had the Bad Theology Kills shirts before I made a book because I didn't realize I was like, oh, that's the title of the book, isn't it?
mm-hmm.
Um, um, so by that point, like the message and the stories that I was sharing, I think I'd shared a lot of them already. Maybe not the chapter. There's one chapter in Bad Theology Kills called the chapter about sex. Um, and I don't think I'd talked as much about that. And although maybe I should, it's a really juicy chapter.
And also, I think people are like excited to hear about it, like not just about sex, but about like someone just being really fucking honest about it.
Mhm.
Um, because like it's still, I don't know why. I mean, it's still one of the taboo subjects. I used to be a phone sex
Yeah.
operator, and like I don't talk about that, and I have so
Oh
many
yeah.
funny stories. You know what I mean? And that's
Hmm.
I remember, oh my gosh. So when I was in radio school, I had this rapport with like guy on the afternoon drive of one of our local shows. And I had mentioned it to him and he
Hmm.
thought it was really funny. He was like, "Oh yeah, I should come into the studio." And then he announced on the air to like the third largest city in Canada that I used to be a phone sex operator. And I was like, "Oh fuck, I hope my classmates aren't listening." And all of them were. And I outed myself and I was like, "Oh shit." Like, and it felt so like raw. And then at the same, and like this is literally what I was
Mhm.
doing for a living, putting myself through school. And then, even now, like I don't talk about it in my work and I'm far from a prude, but there's like it's still the one thing that I don't really share about. So I don't know. I guess I'm saying maybe
Mm.
if you will, I will.
Yeah. I think that's really like any part of it's just like I recognize any place that and not everything has to go online. Like that's the thing. We don't like I think that's another thing too is like there's the pressure to self-disclose all of these different aspects of our life.
Hmm.
I think what I've learned in the past year and maybe I've been learning it for a while is that like I am allowed to keep things for myself too.
Yeah.
Um so like like I think like it's talking about sex, for sticking around this particular example, being able to talk freely about sex and like what I like. I think for my audience and like Christian subculture at large, there's not enough talk about sex, so we don't know how to do it or how to talk about it or like learning how to talk about consent and learning how to talk about what you like in the bedroom begins as conversations between friends, I think,
Hmm.
or at least it should or could be. Um, because like at least for me like I practiced saying what I wanted with other people first, which sounds crazy. I'm just like, but it's not.
Hmm.
Being able to just learn how to say no or learn that you're allowed to say no after you said yes. There's so many different things um that come from that. And I think being able to be an example of someone who's got a little bit more of a you know liberated sexual ethic slash practice um help set the stage for other people a little bit. Although, maybe we need to talk about it more. Hey everyone, this is a new sex talk podcast. Welcome to the Unshakable. I'm just kidding.
The unshakable
Um
headboard. No, it would be
a
the
oh
shakeable headboard. Let me rephrase that.
No, it's so sturdy though. You can grip that thing and there can be tension unshakable. Or just the shaking headboard. I don't know.
The shaking headboard. Yeah, that's the new show. Yeah.
Welcome to our other show.
Hmm.
Yeah, I think that's one of the areas I would love to. I think in that area, it's like once you get free in that area where you're able to, I'll speak for myself. When I was able to finally speak frankly about what I wanted and what I needed and what I liked, and when being able to say no when I want to say no and yes when I want to say yes, and being bold enough to ask for what I want. Um, I did it and I started doing it in every area of my life. Like it's
Mm.
like that's the thing. It's just like if you can ask for what you want in the bedroom, you can ask for a raise at work. If you can ask for what you want in the bedroom, you can ask your parents to treat you with respect and respect your fucking pronouns.
Yeah.
If if you know what you want in the bedroom, you can, maybe correct the go when the waiter says, "Is everything okay?" Say, "Actually, it's not. This is a little cold. Could I asked for no cheese, whatever it is.
Yeah.
You know, there's so like it's just being so fucking for real. Like
Yeah.
maybe that's one of my themes for this year is just like let's be fucking for real, y'all.
Yeah. We need more of
I've been
that.
thinking about my themes. I've been thinking about my things for 2025 because like up until like this week, I really just was like kind of dreading it. But something, I don't know, something flipped a switch, you know, when I kissed a stranger at midnight. And I'm just like, there's so many possibilities.
Who knew? It was all just sitting there waiting for you. There is
Yeah.
something about
I think
I
that's
mean, I
the
know that we give meaning to New Year in the same way we make give meaning to God coming back to like the start.
sure. Very good.
We've decided that like that it means something, that it's a new leaf and it's a fresh start and a whatever. Um, why do you think we do that? Why I mean, clearly we need it. Clearly we need,
Mm-hmm.
some belief that we can push a factory reset button and start
Mm-hmm.
fresh. But why do we need it to be New Year's? Why can't we just choose that any time for ourselves?
Symbolism, maybe.
Mm,
I think that like the power of a symbol is just is really, really helpful. And so it's like, we need an excuse sometimes, or we need an occasion to like really like mark things. And I think like traditions as creatures of habit, and it's just like in like the human psyche to just have these markers and these symbols. So like for me, like my New Year's is more closer to December 21 solstice.
hmm.
Um, I like solstice. I like winter solstice. I like that and the spring equinox, like or even like the summer solstice. Like it's like the darkest point and then the brightest point. And then like, and that's why I think like everybody should have celebrate the pagan wheel of the year because mark the seasons.
Well, and
The
it
church
matches the
calendar
rhythm
is
of the
so
world.
weird.
Like it helps us be aligned with nature. It helps us,
Hello,
yes.
hello.
Yeah.
Oh my god. And like that's what's so bonkers to me. I'm just like the fucking Holy Roman Catholic Church set up the Gregorian calendar and said this is when the year begins. And it's in the middle of dead winter when everything is dead and dying and quiet and the world and the days are shorter. And then capitalism puts the pressure on us, new year, new you. I can't tell you how much shit on TikTok of like weird workout equipment that I don't need. It's
Hmm.
like, oh, you want to lift heavier? You got to get these lifting hooks. You want a bigger booty? You got to get the Bella booty thrust belt thing. And I bought them, and I'll eventually get the courage to use them at the YMCA. um, but it's ugh. What I try to do, what I strive for, is like between like December and the end of January is really not to push myself very hard. I mean, I
Hmm.
try not to push myself very hard ever. Like, I'm not gonna lie to you, I give about 80% all the time. Like everyone's like, you got to give it 110. I'm like, nah, I burn out if I do that. I burn out
Yeah.
very quickly.
That's actually a
Um,
really good philosophy. 80 is the new
yeah.
100.
Hey, come on now. That's when I did my yoga teacher training years ago, they were just like, you can't go hard in every class, you'll burn your body out. You got to give like 80%. Especially during training. And so I
Mm.
did. And so, now I go to yoga class and this is like, if you just want to stay here for the whole class, sometimes I fucking do.
How do you feel about
um,
restorative? I was just thinking when we were
I like
talking before about like that need for the body to regulate and to drop in. Like
mhm.
I love restorative for that, where I will just melt
It's
away.
so
I
good.
resist, and it's like a really bad head game for me, like where like ego just
Hmm.
fucking natters and like tells me how I'm not doing enough and
Yeah.
how that's not really yoga and blah blah blah, all these things. But then once it gets
And
quiet, it's perfect. It's just like, oh, okay.
hmm um one of Patanjali's Yoga Sutras says this basically like through yoga the stillness of mind is retained. And the
Mm,
whole idea of it is just like, this the physical asanas one does in a yoga practice are, it's a mirror to life. Like how you show up to the mat is how you show up to life. If you think that you're not doing enough here, you think you're not doing enough there. But
mm-hmm,
yoga is meant to show you in some ways, and just like, actually you can only go so far. You
mm-hmm,
can't do that thing that they're doing over there. Like he's like, and if you want to get down into a side plank and then you can let your legs fly. And I'm like, I'm telling you what, I'm the most basic at, like I don't teach yoga, I just have my certification. Um, but like my flows are basic as fuck because it's like I'm doing what's in my feels good in my body. It doesn't need to be anybody else's. And if I don't do like doing enough, it's just like compared to what,
mm-hmm.
you know?
Yeah, you're the best authority on
And
you and what you need. Even in
yeah.
yoga, you're
And then
unshakable, man. Like that's amazing.
depending on the day.
Depending on the
But
fair.
that's also like really fun is like when you notice that you're comparing. It's like,
Hmm.
oh, rather than saying, oh, I shouldn't compare myself, or like, giving into it, I just kind of look at it and I'm like, oh, that's interesting, isn't it? You're
Hmm.
comparing yourself to the teacher who has been doing this for 40 years,
Hmm.
you know, like Kevin, you've got fucking arthritis in your right knee. You've dislocated your left knee twice. Your right hip is fucked a little bit. Like you can't do it. That's fine.
Yeah.
You need to put your knee down because you're tired. Okay, put your knee down. You don't have to keep the whole, you know, upper. What is it called? When you have to keep. You don't have to keep your knee up during a lunge. Just doesn't
Put it
matter.
down. Put down the knee.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'll tell you. Like it really. Trisha Hersey really gave me new life when I read Rest is Resistance. It really fucking changed my perspective on so many things because I recognized how much capitalism has brainwashed me.
Hmm.
And that's what she says. She says we have been bamboozled and lied to. And it's like, and she also says that like nobody in the world is gonna like make you rest or slow down. Nobody in in business, it's not good for capitalism for you to slow down,
Yeah.
you know? And so it's to recognize that like I'm not a machine. I'm not a machine. And also who I was before the pandemic and that person's ability level to just hustle, 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 she doesn't exist anymore.
Yeah.
Like I was one of those things where like after I came out of everything, I was like in the world kind of quote unquote return to normal. Is I recognized I actually had a decreased capacity for so many things. I also developed a little bit of social anxiety too. That's
Same.
funny.
Yeah.
Um, and
I
so I
actually
just had
forgot
to
that I like
recognize like
people. I'm only
I had to
rediscovering in the
remember,
last year that I'm like, oh, actually, no, I don't hate people. I like them quite a lot, actually. And I just,
yeah. And I
yeah,
reckon and like all the things like, yeah. So it's recognizing like I can't hustle for what and
hustle
for
for who?
who.
Yeah.
Because it's like I gotta be real, like I'm not gonna be I don't like it's very unlikely that I'm gonna hit like a super rich status one day. It's just like, based on the statistics. And why am I it's like I think like especially last year, like I lost sight of why I was doing my work because I was like, why isn't the money coming? Why isn't the money coming? Why isn't the money coming? I'm doing all the things, I'm manifesting and derp, 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 sure. Sometimes the money comes, sometimes the money doesn't. It's not because I'm a bad person or because I lost faith or I wasn't doing everything perfectly. It was because life changed. Another thing I would say that to quote Octavia Butler, God is change. That's the only fucking thing that we
Mm,
know. And she says, everything you touch, you change. Everything that you change changes you. Change is the only constant. God is change.
That's
Mm.
beautiful. So
If you
yummy.
want to read the scariest, most beautiful book, two books, Parable of the Sower, Parable of the Talents by Octavia Butler. The audiobook is also masterfully performed. Um, but in the book, the main character is writing down basically the beautiful spiritual treatise called Earthseed, where she's just making all these incredible observations. And I hold it as a holy text for myself. Because some of the you want me to read you something? Let me read you
Yeah,
my favorite.
do it.
Because this is like we have no format. We can do what we want.
Hmm.
Let me see.
You know, it's funny while you're
This.
looking that up. Yesterday I had lunch with a friend of mine and she was saying, I worry about working at home that there isn't going to be interaction for me to learn and grow. And I was like, oh, honey, it's in the TV shows you watch, it's in the books you read, it's in like there is mirrors in
Mm-hmm,
everything where you can see yourself or see or get new perspective of how you see the world. And the fact that you have
mm-hmm,
this book where you're just like, this is a sacred text for me, like this is evidence of it will find you.
mm-hmm.
They'll find you everywhere.
Yeah. It's like, and it's just 66 little verses that she wrote down. So this is number 5. God is power, infinite, irresistible, inexorable, indifferent. And yet God is pliable, trickster, teacher, chaos, clay. God exists to be shaped. God is change.
Mm.
Ooh, it's like, um, then there's other like really beautiful things like number 9, drowning people sometimes die fighting their rescuers. Come,
Yeah, that one
Here's
actually
another
like
one.
makes
Get
my
along
heart break in a good way.
to get along with God. Consider the consequences of your behavior. I'm like, T.
Ooh, very potent
And
truth.
here's one.
Just like,
I want to read. I want to read you one more because I feel like it is what we're going through right now. This is number 17. It says when a stability disintegrates. When apparent stability disintegrates, as it must, because God is change, people tend to give in to fear and depression, to need and greed. When no influence is strong enough to unify people, they divide. They struggle one against one, group against group for survival, position, power. They remember old hates and generate new ones. They create chaos and nurture it. They kill and kill and kill until they are exhausted and destroyed, until they are conquered by outside forces, or until one of them becomes a leader most will follow, or a tyrant most fear.
ooh, and that's our show,
There's
folks.
no, and that's our show, everyone. God has changed.
Yeah,
Go,
go
but
read all
it's
of the
like looking at
books.
that, I'm just like, it's, oh my God, it'll shake you to your core. So beautifully written. But like things like this, like being able to look at life itself as the sacred text, and then take it a step further. Can you see your own life as the sacred text? Can you see how God is becoming through you? That's very process theology here now, to
Mhm.
say that God is becoming alongside of you, to say that your will is the same as God's will. And I believe that it's God's will that you would be happy.
See, I
That's
love
another
that. And
Course in
there's a
Miracles.
part of me that feels like that's audacious to claim. And like maybe that's what we need is
Ain't
more
it?
audacity. But
And then what is so actually, and I'm going to quote another thing, A Course in Miracles says that just like, uh, let me just go read it because it's the very, this is A Course in Miracles lesson. I think it's lesson 60, if I'm not mistaken.
I love that your mind can do that. I don't remember shit. I
I
don't remember
have
my own
been,
book.
I've been a student of the course for years now. And, hold on, where's my lesson? Workbook for students, go to lesson 60. There's also a lot of really great tools on the internet. Oh, nice. 61. Lesson says, I am the light of the world. And it says, who is the light of the world except for God's beloved? This is merely a statement of truth about yourself. It is the opposite of a statement of pride or arrogance or of self deception. It does not describe the self concept you've made. It does not refer to any of the characteristics which you have endowed your idols. It refers to you as you were created by God. It simply states the truth. And to the ego, today's idea is the epitome of self glorification. But the ego does not understand humility, mistaking it for self debasement. Humility consists of accepting your role in salvation and taking no other. It is not humility to insist you cannot be the light of the world if that is the function God gave you. It's only arrogance that would assert that this function cannot be for you. The arrogance is always of the ego. Huh! It's
Mm.
not arrogance to say that you are part of love. It is
Mhm.
actually the opposite to insist you are not. And so it really flips it again, flips the whole thing that we learned in our head where we're supposed to make ourselves so fucking I must decrease so that God may increase.
Mhm.
No, you must increase so that God can increase. The only way that God has any presence in the world is through you. Are you not God's hands and feet?
Mm.
And if you're not, that's fine. You don't have to be, but just like from
Yeah.
where I'm sitting, wow, that's a much bigger responsibility.
Mhm.
And also it's responsibility, but it's there's freedom in that because I'm no longer forcing myself to fit into the box or the framework of anybody else.
Yeah.
I'm not having to make myself small. I'm not having to like close myself off to my desire or to my expression. It's like God is in some ways a color maximalist in that way, you know?
Yeah. I
I'd say
love
like,
the I believe that our purpose is not what we
mm-hmm.
do, it's to become the truest version of ourselves.
Yes,
And
yes.
I think that that becomes, if we were all to do it at the same time, that would be heaven on earth. But like, I think that that's kind of our responsibility.
Preach.
I mean, ideally, right? I don't know how likely that will be in our, certainly in our lifetime, but I feel like the
The
more
small
of us,
pockets we can make though, you know?
yeah, the more of us that are doing it, the more that example of that being possible is
Mm-hmm.
planted in the collective. We have more people that are raising children believing that their only
Mm-hmm.
responsibility is to be their truest self. That's where change happens, and it's slow. I believe it's
Mm-hmm.
ultimately possible.
Yes, ultimately,
Um,
yes.
and it's going to take some time, and it's going to take a lot of brave souls to
Mhm.
actually do the thing, to
Yeah.
do to do themselves justice in the
Hmm.
world and to share it with the
Yeah.
world without being afraid of their light being too much or not enough, frankly.
I mean, that's the thing is like you got to recognize one candle by itself in a dark world is not enough, which is why you must get others.
Yeah.
And that's the beautiful thing is if you recognize, it's like, oh, I said this to my teacher one time. I was like lamenting because I was like working with people and they're all struggling with the same thing. And I got really, I was like, it's never going to be enough, no matter how much content I put out or how much I preach the truth or how many people I help come out of the closet, there's still homophobia and there's still transphobia and there's still this brutalizing Christianity. And my teacher said, well, of course not. You can't do it. Like it's not enough on your own. It'll never
Hmm.
be enough. I said, but thank God you're not doing it by yourself. And I was like, just crying.
Like, I just need to
But
sit
just
with
like
that
that's
for a
the
minute.
it's like you recognize you ain't doing it by yourself. And if you are doing it by yourself, I'm not saying you're doing it wrong, but you are missing out on a lot of great opportunities for yourself.
Yeah. And it's lonely doing it alone. Like, we do better in
I'd been doing it.
community.
God, I think that was the other thing I realized this past year is I really have been trying to shoulder my life on my own and do it on my own. And this year I had to ask for I put out no less than I think 6 mutual aid requests this year to put food in the to put gas in the car, food on the table, and get the essentials paid for. I can't do it on my own. My
Yeah.
mother has helped pay my mortgage this year, and I'm like, shout out to her, and like, cause like somehow in her old age she has learned how to finesse her money, and like she's like flipping houses now. It's crazy. I'm just like, girl, you got it. And
And thanks for sharing.
my mother isn't. She's an incredibly generous person. She drives me crazy because that's
Hmm.
a parent's job to drive their children crazy, and vice versa. And she's also so generous. Um, but that's the beauty of this work is like I think what's also funny is like at least maybe it's going to be this year is that we always start off really really gentle with our practices and getting into these things And I think especially in wintertime, we should be quite gentle with ourselves. We should be resting more. We should be honestly, I take if I can get it, I'm gonna take an hour nap every day if I can get it. Um,
Trisha Hersey would be so proud.
I'll, I'm like she is the blueprint. I've never met her. We live in the same city. I'm just like, oh, how can I please buy you coffee or like can we go get a craft cocktail? And I just want to soak in your presence a little bit.
Hmm.
Ooh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna put this on the vision board. I want to do a little like mini conference or like mini gathering of like souls in 2025, like in the summertime at a brewery. And
Ooh,
I'm like, Trisha Hersey would be a really cool guest speaker to have.
agreed.
Like, just, and I want to try to get all locals, all local people to come and be guest speakers because A, it's cheaper.
Hmm.
Um, and B, that's just like, I think that's a cool flavor of thing to do. Anyways, now I'm rambling.
That's okay. I I don't even know how to wrap up this episode. Normally there's like a natural conclusion, but I honestly feel like I could talk to you for forever.
Mm.
Hmm.
Do you have I can wrap it up. I like to end conversations asking the same five questions of everybody. Do you want to
Oh,
play?
sure. I don't have my five questions
It's
though.
called No, I've got the
Oh,
five
you've got the
questions. You
five
can
questions.
borrow
Okay.
this.
Okay.
Yeah. This is how I end my podcast. So, Seryna Myers, are you ready to play just one thing five times? Do 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 do.
Yes.
What's one thing you like about yourself?
I love my openness.
Mm.
Yeah.
What's one thing that you're really proud of? Or just regular proud?
No, I'm really
Or
proud of a lot of things actually. Um, I'm really proud of the person I've become.
mm,
Yeah, like really looking back at, you remember the movie Sliding Doors? Every so often I have these sliding doors
yes.
moments where I'm confronted with my past, where I see like where I took one path when I could have taken another.
Oh yeah.
And I go, whew, yep, nope, happy I ended up here. So I'm really I'm really proud of the person I've become.
Mm-hmm. So good. What's one thing that pisses you off? It can be petty, it can be profound, anywhere in between.
I mean, I've got a lot. I wrote a book on anger for a
Just
reason.
one.
But
Just
just
one.
one,
Just one.
um, I fucking hate the idea of the high vibe tribe and how anything that is
Oh.
like shadow or dark or whatever is somehow bad and is vilified. I think that we need to be willing to get messy in
Mm-hmm.
order to be truly with the light.
I am not a love and light girly. I'm like love
Mm-mm.
and light to everybody.
Like,
I'm
fuck your
like,
love and light.
I'm just like love and light without a commitment to justice
Hmm.
is crazy. I also like all the people who are very manifesty. I'm just like, I want like and only believe in manifestation. And they're just like to the point where just like you attract everything, including the bad things. I want you to go to a homeless person, look them in the eye, and explain this to them that they
Hmm.
welcomed this into their life by their vibe.
Yeah,
Or to somebody who was a victim of something terrible in their childhood and explain to them that somehow
it was their
they
fault.
what
Yeah.
like
Do you know what's really wild though? Is I
no
know a woman who believed that. I met her, this is before I even started my spiritual path. And
mm,
she told me that before she became an accountant, she had like a really horrific, like left to die, awful assault that happened.
shit yeah
And she is so of that belief that she was like, I'm grateful to the men who did that to me. And I was like, I'm sorry, what the
woo
fuck?
okay
And I mean, and I had no spiritual background at all. And I thought she was completely Looney Tunes. And, and I know that there's probably a degree of that that's a trauma response that like you almost need
yeah
to
it's a way
feel
of
that.
dealing with
Yeah. But
hmm
I mean, kudos
it's
to her
hard
for
for me
being
to
able to
swallow
reconcile
that
it, but that's huge. Yeah. I still can't. And that was like
yeah
probably 20 years ago.
yeah I everyone you got to make peace in your own way so
Yeah. If
I'm
it
not
works for
I'm
you,
not your
cool.
spiritual director so
Yeah.
do you like it I love it oh Tippy I have my altar over here and sometimes Tippy goes and does a big stretch in front of it I'm just like she prays
Oh,
um fourth question what's
yes.
something that you are committed to
Mm. So funny having this be at the beginning of the year. It feels like a resolution almost. I'm committed to continue asking myself uncomfortable questions, like of leaning
I
in
like that.
even when it's
Hmm.
uncomfortable and I want to disassociate. And maybe I will disassociate, but I'll come back. Yeah,
Yeah,
I'm committed to being in the discomfort and to learn from it. Yeah,
I
asking the
love
hard
this.
questions.
Last one. What's one thing you want to do before you die?
Oh,
Just one.
the first thing that dropped in my head is I really want to go to Greece. I don't know why.
Oh my gosh, yes. It's
Like
so
since I was like 15, it's been like this place, this mythical whatever. And
it
there's
is as beautiful as the pictures and
uh
more.
see, I think
I've
there's
been
something
there.
for me there.
Something magic. There's some Greek human who's like gonna be look at you like, hey, and just to like flirt with
And I'll
you,
be like, I'm married, but thanks.
and they're just like, well, who's they're actually gonna see you and your partner. There's like, I saw you and your partner across the bar, and I like your vibe. um, yeah,
Yeah,
but that's just one thing 5 times, and you can use that whenever you want.
that's really fun. That's really, really fun. So what's one thing that you want to do for this year? Like of all the things.
Um, it's I actually know exactly what it is. I want to win the Glitz season 9 drag pageant of East Atlanta Village.
I have been
I
seeing your posts as Gagatha. You're gorgeous.
Agatha Christie.
Oh
Thank
my
you.
God. And like and you're a baby drag, right? Like you're brand new?
Pretty new. I've been like,
Wow.
putting on the heels and the lashes and the makeups and do like going out maybe like once a month to once every other month for like a year and some change. I wanted to audition last year, but I just missed all of the deadlines, and so I couldn't do it. This year, I went to one of the audition nights and fucking nailed it.
Yes, you did.
And the thing that made me really happy is like it's also like my local bar that I go to. Like I'm a regular there, so all the queens already know me. Uh, and it feels like family. And then all the people who I've looked up to for forever have been coming up to me saying, "We're really excited to watch you and see the
Mm.
growth." And just like last a couple years, so I'm Agatha Christie, another queen named Edna Allen Ho. Um, she was like, you've got good concepts. You need to stick to your guns." And I was
Okay.
like, she's like, it's like because like a lot of girls like you're gonna don't try to be something that you're not. And I'm like, period, great, thank you, because with this hip, I she ain't dropping no death on
Yeah.
nobody. You want me to get down on the ground? I can drop it low and then
Yeah.
pick it up real slow.
Yeah.
But
And
and I
there
have a
is
beard.
perfection in that. Yeah.
Yeah. So I
I
am
actually love your beard
I
as part of Gagatha. Like it
too.
yeah. It feels I don't know
It's
why, it
different.
feels
It's fun
glittery for some reason. Like it just brings a little extra magic.
because I put glitter
Okay, well that's
in it.
probably a good reason why it feels glittery. I love that I
Yeah.
have the experience just through picture too. Like I can imagine what it's like to be in the room with you.
Can't wait. So that's what I'm looking forward to. And the one thing I really want to do, maybe I'll give 100% to that. I'm giving 100% to this
Ooh.
thing because it's also just like, one show a week for 7 weeks, even
Yeah.
though that's going to be like, for me, that's going to be a lot.
Yep.
But I'm excited
When
and
you'll
I
have
want to
the
win.
naps in
Uh,
between. So that'll help you stay
oh
charged.
yeah.
Yeah.
And also like, being underemployed, I've got a little bit too much time on my hands. So like, this is going to be
Why not direct it
great.
into drag? That's perfect. I love it.
A positive obsession is what is another earth seed idea.
Hmm.
A positive obsession blunts pain.
I need a positive obsession. I have been all of
Yeah,
my hobbies are like hand related and I've been healing from carpal tunnel surgery, so I haven't been able to do shit for like 6 weeks. So I need a new positive obsession. I'm excited.
be healed.
It sounded so pervy to be like all my hobbies are hand related, but also that. Also that.
Yeah,
Thank you
well,
so much for coming and hanging out.
yeah,
For saying yes to a
this was a
complete
really,
stranger. It was
yeah,
awesome.
now we're friends, and now we can like, yeah, thank you for having me on your show. Thank you for bringing it back. I think this is going to be cool. like I'm really excited about getting back into my pod. So let's trade places. You can come over, be on mine, and we
I'd love it.
can. Cool. I'll send you a link.
And also send
I like
me
you.
that I like you. You're the kind of person who I've followed and I'm like, you know what? I bet you we'd totally be friends. But now I
And
feel
here we
like
are,
we would totally be
friends.
friends. Yeah. Um, if you are on your own reclamation journey, whether you are doing it from like unraveling everything that you've learned from the church or not, Kevin's books are medicine, and it's not a word I use lightly. I'm going to add some links to the show notes so that you've got them, along with other links of where you can find them on L interwebs.